at the digestive system in this lecture series. So before we start, think about what the digestive system is and what it includes, as well as some of the different functions of the digestive system. And we will take a look at those and discuss those as we start this lecture. So the digestive system is going to have to do with us intaking food. So we'll call that ingestion. And then once we ingest it, we have to digest it. So in some way, we have to be able to break it down. And once we break it down, we can then use that which we broke down for different metabolic processes. So we have to absorb it, and then we can use it. Now, our digestive system, in terms of its structure and parts, can be divided into two main sections. So we have an alimentary canal, which is essentially just a single tube existing all the way from our mouth to our anus. So our alimentary canal really begins with an opening and it ends with an opening. And along the way, we have these accessory organs that will be associated with our alimentary canal and aid in digestion as well. So with this next picture, what we see here is we see our alimentary canal. So we start here in the mouth, and we'll name some of these structures up here. We ultimately go into the esophagus, stomach, our small intestine, large intestine, and along the way we have a few accessory organs of digestion, so our liver, gallbladder, and pancreas here as well. We also have some accessory structures up here in the mouth, so we have tongue, teeth, different salivary glands as well that'll aid in digestion. So before we actually begin digesting food, we actually have to ingest it. So we have to bring it in, and once we bring it in, we can then begin to digest food. So we can do digestion in two different ways. We can mechanically digest it, or we can chemically digest it. So mechanical has to do with just physically breaking down the food and not doing any type of chemistry on it. We're not changing the chemical makeup of the food that we have ingested. We're just physically altering it. Okay. Now chemical digestion is going to be the exact opposite. Now we are chemically doing something different that alters our food. So this has to do with digestive enzymes, and we'll see these enzymes come into play in the mouth as well as in our stomach and small intestines. But just keep in mind, mechanical, we're physically breaking it down. Chemical, we are chemically breaking it down. Digestion really begins in the mouth, as we'll see. And in the mouth, we actually have both mechanical digestion via our tongue and teeth and things like that. And then chemical digestion will also begin in the mouth. We have different enzymes present in our mouth. So we have things called lingual lipase and salivary amylase, and those will both be involved with chemical digestion in the mouth. After we digest it, we then have to get it into our blood. So digestion doesn't really do any good for us if we're not able to actually absorb that which we're breaking down. So we absorb it into our blood, and in some instances our lymphatic capillaries as well. And then we will ultimately get rid of, and so through defecation, we will eliminate waste through our anus as feces. So our alimentary canal, whenever we look at it, there are different histological features of it that tell you that it is, in fact, the alimentary canal. And we'll see these different layers. Now, one layer that we have a serosal layer. I actually skipped a slide. Let me go back. Okay, so we have a mucosal layer. This mucosal layer is going to be the internalmost layer of our stomach. It's really in contact with the lumen of our stomach, if we're talking about that, or other parts of our alimentary canal. And what it'll have associated with it is epithelial tissue. And so if you remember, epithelial tissue is going to consist of different shapes and different layers of cells that make up the epithelium, so that are lining a surface. And in this instance, oftentimes we have stratified squamous. For example, in our esophagus is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. We then have something called lamina propria, which contains loose connective tissue. Within the lamina propria, we also have some some immune cells that are present here. And then we have the muscularis mucosae. And so this is a smooth muscle, and it's in this relatively constant state of contraction, which causes these wrinkles. If you're talking about it in the stomach, it causes these little wrinkles in the stomach called gastric rugae, and that can help to increase overall surface area for absorption. As I said, our lamina propria, this loose connective tissue, contains some immune cells, so this is mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. And then our muscularis mucosa, as I said, it's in this constant state of contraction, this tension, that help to increase surface area in different parts of our GI tract. Next layer we'll discuss is the submucosa. The submucosa, because it is submucosa, it will be underneath our mucosa, and it is outside the mucosal layer. It will also contain loose connective tissue, along with lots of different lymphatic vessels, nerves, arteries, and veins as well. So we'll take a look at these different layers in just a few slides, and all of this will begin making sense to you. Now, our next layer, we have our muscularis externa. Okay, this muscularis externa generally has two muscle layers, but in the stomach, it has actually a third. So the two layers that are present throughout all of the alimentary canal is the longitudinal layer of the muscularis externa, as well as the circular layer of the muscularis externa. Both of these layers are smooth muscle, and when they contract, they help to produce movements that aid in gastric motility, and this gastric motility helps to physically break up food for mechanical digestion. Now, the third layer that we see only in the stomach is called the oblique layer. So it is more obliquely oriented, whereas these two, this is oriented longitudinally, and this is oriented circularly. And so when you look at drawings and different models of this, these different layers of the muscularis externa become a little more evident. Now, the outermost layer external to our muscularis externa is our serosal layer. And again, it has loose connective tissue. It serves to kind of anchor the alimentary canal to surrounding areas. And this serosa is also composed of some visceral peritoneum. So we'll talk about what peritoneum is. It's really analogous to the pericardium in the heart, as well as the pleura in the lungs. And our different areas, so we have a mouth, pharynx, and esophagus, they're going to have something called adventitia as opposed to our serosa. And this adventitia contains collagen fibers, which help to anchor it to some surrounding structures. Now, if we look at this picture, this left is a general model of a portion of our alimentary canal. So you can see, let's start internalmost. So we have a mucosal layer, which is here, and part of the mucosa, you have epithelium, you have the lamina propria, that loose connective tissue, as well as your muscularis mucosae, all right in here. Now, external to that, you have your submucosa, which is going to be located all right in here, and you can note that it has nerves and blood vessels, and there would be some lymphatics as well. We next have our muscularis externa, and so note a circular layer here and a longitudinal layer here, and then if this was in the stomach specifically, we would have an additional oblique layer running a little more obliquely. And then this outermost, we have our serosa layer. So we have loose connective tissue and then an epithelium on the outside. On the right, we can see these same things, but we can now see them histologically. So up here, we see all of this consists of our mucosa. So this upper portion up here, this is all going to be epithelial tissue. Down here, you have your lamina propria, and then this thin little layer here is going to be your muscularis mucosa. All of this in here, this is all submucosal layers, so you can see arteries and veins or blood vessels here. You have your muscularis externa. Sometimes it's also called the tunica muscularis, but we're calling it the muscularis externa here. And so there would be a longitudinal and an oblique layer, and you can really tell these layers apart by their by the shape of their nuclei. So you can see this layer up here where my cursor is. Hopefully you can see my cursor. These nuclei are a little more elongated. So that means these these fibers are running this way. They're running longitudinally, these muscle fibers. So when we cut the nucleus, you see the nucleus as a more elongated structure. Whereas this layer down here where my cursor is, the nucleus look more just like little specks or dots. So this would be a circular layer that is not running this way, but is running more up and down and encircling this. So whenever we take a section of it, all you see is just one small point of the nucleus of the muscle cell that looks somewhat like a little speck or a dot. And then lastly, we see our serosal layer out here, which is the outermost layer of our alimentary canal. So if we go back to the mucosa for a second, if this is all mucosal tissue, this space up here, this white space, this has to be the lumen of whatever we're talking about. So maybe this is the esophagus, maybe this is part of the small intestine, I'm not sure. But this white space up here, this is the lumen where products, digested products, and that which we ingested and then digested would be located up here. So I briefly mentioned this idea of peritoneum a second ago and what it means. So I said it's analogous to our pleura, which is associated with our lungs, and our pericardium, which is associated with our heart. Just like the pleura and the pericardium, it contains two layers. It contains a visceral layer as well as a parietal layer. And just as the pleura and the pericardium, the visceral layer is going to be actually on the surface of our organs because it's visceral, viscera meaning organ. And then the parietal layer is going to be lining the body cavity. So in this instance, it's going to be lining part of the abdominopelvic cavity. We'll then mention, specific to the peritoneum, where you have two layers of visceral peritoneum, where you have them come together very closely. We'll refer to that as the mesentery. And we'll see mesentery as it contains different blood vessels and lymphatics as well. Now, we can use these terms, we can use peritoneum, and we can associate different organs and where they're located relative to the perineum. So we can call them intraperitoneal or retroperitoneal organs. Intraperitoneal organs means that there is only a layer of peritoneum behind the organ, so on the anterior surface of it, as you would see it in the body. It is not overlaid by a layer of peritoneum, whereas retroperitoneal structures like the kidney is generally the classic example. It is covered on its anterior surface by a layer of parietal peritoneum. So we call this retro meaning behind, retroperitoneal, behind the peritoneum. So these are some other terms that we'll discuss referring to peritoneum, and then we'll take a look at a picture. So I said mesentery is really just visceral peritoneum that has doubled over on itself, so it's just a double layer, and it will usually contain blood vessels and nerves. We have something called the greater omentum as well as a lesser omentum, and we'll see where these lie relative to the stomach and some other structures like the liver. And then we will have something called the mesocolon, sometimes called the transverse mesocolon. It attaches from the transverse colon and the sigmoid colon back to the posterior aspect of the abdominal wall and helps to anchor it to that point. So if we take a look here, you can see the structure in red, and then you can see ones in blue. All of the red is going to be parietal peritoneum, and you know it's parietal peritoneum because it's not directly on the surface of our organs. And then we have a blue layer that is on the surface of the organ. So here it's on the surface of the liver, here it may be on a portion of the stomach and around our intestines. And note that just as the pleura and the pericardium, the parietal and the visceral layers are really continuous. They're really not separate structures. There's areas where they reflect onto each other. And then we can see this blue line, which is visceral peritoneum. You can see an area here, and you can see ones down here and right here as well, where it's really a double fold. It's a double layer of visceral peritoneum, and we'll call that mesentery. So that's what you can see right here. And we'll see mesentery as it suspends and anchors organs in place within our abdominal cavity. And then here we can see retroperitoneal organs. So what do you notice about the location of retroperitoneal organs relative to the parietal peritoneum. So hopefully you notice that they're located all behind the parietal peritoneum. The peritoneum is only on their anterior surface. So this is probably a pancreas. This down here would be the rectum and portions of the sigmoid colon. And so what we have is we have a whole list of structures that exist only behind the peritoneum that we'll call retroperitoneal organs. There's a nice mnemonic to remember these. It is SAD pucker, SADPUCKER. I won't go over what all of the letters mean. You can look it up. Just type in SAD pucker retroperitoneal into Google, and it will give you a long list of these 9 organs and structures that exist posterior to the parietal peritoneum. So I'll give you the first 3. There's suprarenal glands. There is your aorta, and then the D in SAD is your duodenum. So it's really just parts of your duodenum. It's not the whole thing. And so that's likely what this is here. But you have all these organs that are found only behind a layer of parietal peritoneum. So we also see our greater and lesser omenta, or omentum being singular. So we have this large drape-like structure coming from this greater curvature of the stomach, draping down over our part of our large intestine, our transverse colon, and then our small intestine. This is the greater omentum, and then you also see a lesser omentum here attached to the lesser curvature of the stomach and the inferior aspect of the liver. You can then take this lesser omentum and you can really divide it even further into a hepatogastric and a hepatoduodenal portion, so hepatogastric ligament and hepatoduodenal ligament, but we won't really go into depth on that. But we will see that there are certain structures that exist within this free edge here, and there is a space, as you can see by this arrow, that exists back here behind this lesser omentum.